Hello, beautiful teachers, and welcome to another Vibrant Music Teacher Chat. This is the last live show before our summer break, so make sure you keep your questions coming in. I'm happy to stick around and answer a few extras today if you have them, so that I can get them answered before we break for summer. Today's show is a bit of a look back at the last year and some of the fun things that we've learned together, just as an opportunity to appreciate how far we've all come and how awesome we all are for continuing to learn new things and improve and get together as a community on the regular. I love it. So we're going to be talking about 24 different things we've learned this school year. Bananas, right? That's a lot of things. Let's pat ourselves on the back, right? Before we get there, just a couple of bits of news. So, number one, we have a new course in the membership. Obviously, this will go in the member email next week, but if you're a member, you can go check it out now. It's about legato pedaling. It's a very short course because it's really to the point. It's just, I get questions about, and I have a specific way of teaching legato pedaling to my students that is pretty much fail-safe. And I didn't used to have that. And I know it's not something that's in books. When you find stuff in books about pedaling, it's often about like much more complicated things. Not just, how do we teach a beginner to pedal with their heel on the floor, right? So it's a step-by-step process that I follow to teach pedaling to my students, and it works. So I hope you'll check it out. It's in the course library now. You can also right now buy Teacher Turbo Boost tickets. So the link is in the description. There are virtual and in-person options available. So if there's any chance you can make it to Cincinnati, Ohio on July 20th and 21st, that's a weekend, please come along. I would love to see you there in person. In real life, in the flesh. Sounds a bit weird, right? But in real life, so that we can connect and share ideas and learn some great things together. So that's in Cincinnati, Ohio. Now, if there's no way you can make it to Cincinnati, I get it. You can buy a virtual ticket. That will give you access to a live stream of the event and recordings. I have gotten a couple of questions from people who are attending in person about whether they'll get the recordings, and yes, you will. So both cohorts will get the recordings afterwards. Those will take a couple of weeks to edit, and then we'll get them up for you. But if you have a virtual ticket, you can access the live stream during, which includes most of the day, just not some of the silly, fun, chatty bits. Like obviously the lunch break is just a break on the live stream, and the craft and chatter at the end of the day, that would just be like a cacophonous sound, right? But all the actual sessions will be on the live stream. And you can chat to each other about the live stream on the live chat and also in the Facebook group, which we have for the event. So I hope you'll join us one way or another if you can. Ooh. Do you think you can make it in person? That would be amazing. I mean, either way is amazing. Oh, you were hoping. Right, fair. So, glad that we have that other option for you. So that is the Teacher Turbo Boost. If you're watching this live or soon after it goes out, the early bird pricing is still available. It's going away on June 1st, so that's pretty soon. So you want to hop to it and make your decisions as soon as possible if you want to get that pricing. There will still be tickets available after that. The price is just going up a little bit. And then, yeah, either way, I hope you can join us one way or another. And finally, I hope you've signed up for the totally free Ate That Frog challenge. This is our anti-procrastination challenge that we're running all throughout August. So if you sign up for it now, it's like you're giving yourself a little present for August. That might be the start of your school year or like leading up to it. Perfect time to just get the year off on a great start and not put things off. Yeah? So it's called Ate That Frog. So the short link is vibrantmusicteaching.com/8TF. It is also in the description though, so all the links are there for you. Okay, those are my bits of news. Let's dive into our 24 things we learned this year. Okay, so most of these things are from the YouTube show, and then I've got a few things at the end that are from the podcast this year. This is just a fun way of us looking back together. And also, if you miss some episodes of the show, it's going to mean that you might be prompted to go back and check them out and see what they're all about, maybe over the summer while the show is off. If you had things that you learned from these different episodes or connected to that, please let me know in the chat. So number 1, back at the start of the school year, we talked about interleaved practice and different modes of practice, especially interleaved and Pomodoro practice. So if you don't know what those terms mean, interleaved is where we do a little bit of A, a little bit of B, then back to A, then maybe C, then maybe B, right? So we're splicing things up and splitting up our practice like that and looping back on things. This is something that I've been talking about for a while and talking about doing in our lessons as well. But we talked about that back in September specifically because that's when we launched Vivid Practice. When I was preparing for this show, I know because September is like burned into my mind because there was the crazy Tanara shutting down and all the things happening. And I was at the conference in Alberta, Canada. So there was a lot going on. I can't remember it. But still, when I was looking back on this year, I was like, wow, it really was just last September. Like, that actually does seem so recent that we launched the app. And we've been loving it. So, yeah, we talked about interleave practice and Pomodoro practice. And then after that, we talked about practice incentives. So if you're on the fence about using incentives in your studio, if you've used them and you're not quite sure why it didn't work for you, or you're looking for a new incentive and you keep feeling like you need to refresh and rethink them, maybe take a look back at that episode. I am very much someone who doesn't tell you exactly what to do. I tell you what I think works and what works for me. And I don't look down on anyone who does things differently. So if you listen to my views about incentives and go, nope, you're wrong, it's fine. But I hope we gave you a little bit of a way to think in a fresh way about practice incentives and programs. So like prize boxes and tracking charts and that kind of thing. Because in my opinion, even though I've used them myself in the past, they don't actually work for the goals that we have for them. So I'll leave that there. You can go check out that episode for more. Then we dove into silent films. And I have to say the biggest thing I've learned from the silent film and has kind of sunk in over time since then. So I shared my thoughts about organizing our silent film festival and afterwards about how it went and things I might change and stuff like that. But the thing that's really stood out to me ever since then, as I've looked back on it over time, and especially now that I've started handing out silent film music to students for next year, is how much they loved it. And that sounds like such a simple thing, but it really drove home to me how recitals, concerts just aren't for everyone. I think a lot of my students really enjoy our concert, but the Silent Film Festival, and we've done different types of performances always over the years, and parents are always very lovely about them, and students always get a lot out of them, but there was something extra special about the Silent Film Festival. Now, one part of it is just we got to do this in this amazing venue, the Stella Cinema, which is close-ish to us. And it's this beautiful, restored 1920s style cinema. So, I mean, it's pretty epic. There's like velour armchairs, the front row, which we didn't use in my in my festival, but the front row is actually beds where you can lie down because the screen's right there. Anyway, it's just an amazing space. And they were so lovely to work with. So that is part of it. But a big part of it is the thing that I think I might have loved as well growing up about it, which is, and a student said it to me directly when I gave him the silent film music for next year. He said, oh, we're doing that again? And he looked so excited. And I said, yeah, did you enjoy it? And he said, yeah, it was the best because nobody was watching me. And yeah, nobody was staring at you. But you got to just play your music, play it at your best, and you didn't feel like all eyes were on you. And that makes a big difference to some students. But I also had such amazing feedback from parents about that festival, because I think it was like they appreciate seeing their kids in concert. I'm not saying they don't have a nice time at our recitals, but this was like an actual fun outing for them. Rather than just, oh, I'm so proud of my child, this is lovely. It was like, oh, this is great, this is really fun. So, yeah, highly encourage you to give it a go if you've been considering it. Okay, number 4. We've got a lot to go. How to plan buddy lessons. So I did one of our live shows where we planned together, and I pulled up on screen my spreadsheets where I was doing some of my simple high-level planning for my weeks in my buddy lesson time, which is the shared time that my students have. And I think you all really enjoy that style of video from time to time where I'm actually actively doing something for my studio so that you can just hear my thought process as I talk out loud as I do it. On that note, actually, as I go through these, I would love to hear what you want out of this show. Because, a summer break is often a time to reflect on how we do things and think about how we're going to do things in the future. So, is there something you would like to see done differently here on the show? Is there some topics you'd like to see covered or different styles of show you'd like to see? Let me know. I'm curious to hear from you. Maybe you want to come on the show. Maybe not. Let me know. Okay, the next one, we talked about some metrics for music studios, the numbers that we need to track in our studios. And that was a brief version of a presentation that I actually gave at NCKP last summer, which is really fun. Then we had one of the most fun episodes for me, actually, because we got a good chat going, I feel, in this one, which was 13 random pieces of advice for piano teachers, or tips for piano teachers, can't remember which I called it. That one was really fun, I think, because we spanned a huge range of topics, and it was just fun to put together. And hopefully you picked up something from that. Then we had how to get students out of position-based reading. So we talked about how do we encourage students to break out of positions if they get stuck in positions. Do you have any students like that? So that was a great topic to look at and to think about how to break that habit for students, especially if you have transfer students who have been in a position-based method for a long time. How do we help them to move and branch out of that position-based thinking? Not every student who learns in that type of method, by the way, gets into this mindset, but I'm sure many of you will resonate with. You can see those students who think like that, they get so flustered when they have to even do a crossover or move slightly or move around a lot. They just really are so frustrated by, no, it's just supposed to stay here, which means you only get 10 keys on the piano. And there are quite a lot more than 10 keys on a piano, right? Okay. Then we talked about solutions for broken arms in your studio. And I think it was just after that I had a student that then had a broken arm. So it was very convenient timing, or maybe it was just before and that's why we did it. But I feel like I've had several student injuries this term. I don't know why that is. None of them are happening in piano, but I've had a lot of injuries happening around my students. It's sports and it's nothing serious, but yeah, a lot of injuries going on and we have to roll with it. Have you ever had a parent who thought that they had to stop lessons? I've had that before, where a parent has said, oh, so-and-so broke their arm, so I guess we have to take a break from lessons for a while. And I'm like, no, you don't, right? And they're often really glad because they have to take a break from most activities when these kinds of things happen. So that's really great. So next up, we talked about how to get more out of conferences. I would love to hear in the chat if you've been to conferences and what tips you would have, because I shared some of mine there, but I know different people have different ways of making the most of that conference time. It's not cheap to travel to a conference. Often the biggest cost is actually the accommodation, which is one of the reasons we chose to do our event in Cincinnati, because it's cheaper to stay there and not that expensive to fly there. A lot of places do have direct flights to there, even if you don't, you get a connection through Chicago or something. That's usually not the biggest cost. It's the hotel. So I made sure to choose a city with plenty of Airbnb and different budget hotel options and different things so that we don't have to pay like New York prices or Chicago prices or whatever, because that's normally the biggest cost. So yeah, let me know how you make the most of that spending, whether you found it to be worth it. I always have, and it's a big cost for me because I'm usually taking an international flight, right? Well, I'm obviously always taking an international flight. We don't have a conference here in Ireland, but I mean, transcontinental is what I mean. So yeah, it's a pretty big journey. Like this summer, which will be their winter in a few weeks, really, I'm heading to Australia. Before I'm going to Cincinnati, I'm going to Australia for their conference. So I'm going all the way down to Melbourne, which is extreme. Now, obviously, I'm speaking, so that's part of why the travel is worth it. But it makes such a difference to attend at least one conference a year. I've been lucky the last few years to be able to attend two, but at least one makes such a difference to how enthusiastic I am about teaching, how connected you feel to the teaching community. But yeah, I'd love to hear what makes it make a difference for you, or whether you've had a bad conference experience and it hasn't been worth it. Okay, then we had the power of making things easy. And this is something I'm talking about actually at the Teacher Turbo Boost in Cincinnati and on the virtual live stream, of course, and adding ease into things. And I'm really looking forward to this because, as well as focusing on making things easy, which I believe makes our lessons more inclusive of different styles of learners, different additional needs, neurodivergent students, and everyone. It helps everyone learn better. If we go back to this idea of what are all the modalities I could teach this in to make it easy. So I'm excited about that part of it, but I'm also excited because I'm going to be featuring some great pieces with a resource that I'm going to be working on more when I get back in August. That's for the membership. Is possibly a 2025 resource at this stage. I don't want to get your hopes up, but it is going to be great when it finally comes out. Okay, and then we had music neutrality, a term I made up that maybe makes no sense to you. Music neutrality or genre neutrality. This is about us treating genres neutrally. So not acting as though classical music is above all else, or maybe classical and jazz are above all else, but really taking our students' favorite music seriously, no matter what it is. So even if it's death metal, no, we don't have to listen to it. We don't have to love it, but we do have to appreciate that it is their favorite music and that their opinion is not invalid. After that, we looked at the MTB exams. I really had a great experience with using the MTB exams for the first time this year. And it's actually, so I actually did one of their exams yesterday again. So continued using the system. Because if you have something come up with a student like it had with this student, but they just weren't done on the normal time frame. Now, I really like students to only do their exam repertoire and stuff for 3 months. And I still agree with myself that that is a good goal and is achievable for most students in most circumstances. But things come up, like students are unwell or there's different things that happen. that mean that they can't do it. And if this student had have been with a more traditional exam board, I would have had to put in their application before I realised that they couldn't do it in time. It would have been stressful for everyone. They either would have gone in for the exam and just had a miserable time and possibly failed or scraped through, or we would have just forwent the fee and the parents would have had to pay that even though they didn't take the exam in the end. Not the end of the world, but not great. Whereas this case, the student had been unsure for several weeks and wasn't sure if they were going to be ready yesterday, but we set that target and we said, okay, you'll come in and we'll make a decision. If you want me to check over something because they were feeling quite uncertain, then that's fine. We can do that at the start of the lesson. And then if you're happy to go for it, we'll go for it. If not, we can delay it one more week. And so they did. And they came in and they checked the things they wanted to check with me. I left the decision up to them. And they decided, no, I want to get it done. I'm okay if I don't get the most amazing result I could. I just want to get it done. So I was able to go on the website, register them, set everything up, put it through the app, all right there. And that there is something for that. It's really great. So more about MTB exams if you're curious about them in the separate show about that. The next one is, well, I shared a show about the MTNA conference and things I learned. And one of my favourite things I learned is the smiley face stickers. So it's such a little thing. It was something the Bastian sisters, I went to their showcase, which was about their technique books, and they just happened to show this as an example because they showed several clips from lessons, videos of lessons. And they showed a clip where they put a smiley face sticker here on the student's hand, and then another one on the music stand on the piano. So it's there and the piano keys are here, right? So their hands on the piano, the smiley face sticker is there. And the idea was to get them to do wrist lift-offs. So they named this smiley and the smiley on the piano. So, what's this guy called? Steve. What's she called? Georgia. Okay, every time you finish a phrase, Steve is going to say hi to Georgia, right? And then Steve says hi to Georgia. And I've used that with several students and I just love it. It's the kind of thing you pick up at a conference that you would never know to look up, right? And you might have discovered it in a book or whatever, but there's something special about being at an in-person conference, because if you go online, it's still great, but you tend to attend the things you know you're going to love. Whereas when you go in person, if there's a breakfast showcase slot and you're free and you just look at what's available and go, that looks the most interesting. And you wouldn't have picked it out to watch online, but you're like, I might as well go along. And you pick up something like that, which I love. Okay, number 14. Whoa, we're getting there. We're over halfway. Why your strength is your weakness and your weakness is your strength. That's a more recent chat. Does anyone remember it? This was where we talked about understanding our own strengths and weaknesses, because our weaknesses in our playing are often our teaching strengths, because we are good at breaking down those things that we struggle to learn. And our strengths are often our weaknesses because we don't realize that so much learning has to happen because it was natural or easy for us, right? After that, we did a more practical session where we looked at creating a newsletter in Canva. And I've heard from someone in a comment just the other day that they haven't set up a newsletter for their studio before and they're considering doing it this year. So hopefully that's helpful for those of you in that position. I'm happy to report that my newsletter has now gone out. I send out the digital one. I always send out the attached PDF in an email and then give out physical copies after that. So I send out the PDF first and say you'll also get a physical copy at your child's next lesson. Then we print them out. I print those at my local office supply shop. Great little shop near me. And they print, they have a big proper laser printer and they print double-sided on A3. So that's the way I do mine. And then we just fold them in half here and give them out. I have learned, by the way, here's a little tip With anything that we're giving to lots of students, I have learned my lesson, and I always get the little tiny post-its and write the student's name and put it on each one. Because otherwise, you're going to be left with one at the end and go, who did I miss? Right? And it's even more important when you have multiple teachers working in a studio like I do. But I miss students too. Like, they walk out the door and I just forget that I was supposed to give them one. And this way, I have it with the post-it note with their name on it. And then I just, the next week, take the post-it note off, put it in their hand. And that way we don't miss anyone. Okay, the next one was the difference between students quitting and graduating. So we talked about dealing with students quitting. And the distinction I really like to make is, are they quitting? Because a lot of the time we talk about that and we think about it like that ourselves, but they're not quitting. Like, if they've been with us 8 years, 10 years, 14 years, whatever the case may be, even 5 years, if they've achieved their goals for music lessons, they're not quitting. They're graduating. They've achieved what they wanted to with lessons with us. It doesn't mean we can't be sad. Like, if we were a teacher in a regular school and our students graduated and we were going to miss them, we would be sad like that. But it's a different thing to, like, lamenting them quitting. Then, much more recently, we looked at what to do when students are crying in lessons and how we can deal with very sensitive, highly sensitive children. We looked at how to stop procrastinating to prepare us for our 8 That Frog challenge. Again, the link for that challenge, it's totally free and it's in the description, vibrantmusicteaching.com/8TF. So I won't say more about that. Then we looked at preparing for a recital. That was last week. Amazing. We're up to date. And then I've got a few more to share with you that are from the podcast, because sometimes I share things from the show here on the podcast, so there is some overlap. But many of you may not listen to the podcast if you're more of a YouTube person. And we do talk about different things over there and talk in a different way. So a few of the things we learned on the podcast, just a few, are what to do when students ask how long is left. I unpacked that question with Carmen, who's on Team VMT, and it was a great discussion about, what do we do when students are impatient about their lessons, right? Then we looked at bullet journaling for piano teachers. I looked at that with Carmen as well, because she's a bullet journaler, which is a world I'm not too familiar with and was really interesting to take a look into. I discussed with myself, that was a solo show, how to dissuade mnemonic loving parents. So we've been doing this special series on the blog just sporadically throughout the last year of articles that are directed towards parents that you can then share with parents in your studio to convince them of things you want to convince them of. From an outside source, right? So on the podcast, I talked about how we discuss mnemonics with parents, and if you don't want them to be used too much in your studio because you don't too focus on note names, etc., how do you have that conversation with parents? Last two, the value of being the teacher to yourself that you are to others. I'll say that again. The value of being the teacher to yourself that you are to others. In other words, treat yourself how you treat others. What's the commandment? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, something like that. This is like the reverse of that, because as teachers, we're so nice to everyone else. And in lessons, we would never be cruel to our students or tell them, oh my gosh, why haven't you learned this yet? What's wrong with you? But that's what we say to ourselves. So being the right kind of teacher for yourself. And finally, recently on the podcast, we have also looked at piano recital alternatives. So if you're thinking about doing some different type of a recital, that's another one to look at. Phew, that's a lot of learning. You're welcome, Teresa. It's my pleasure. I hope that gave us all a sense of accomplishment. If you've been to even some of those, right? You've invested in your professional development, you've spent time improving as a teacher, and that is a wonderful thing, and I love you for being here. It's fantastic. So I'll check in with any questions. If you have a question, write it in now. Happy to stick around to answer those. Just catching up with the chat. Switching to the challenge board next year. Yeah, interesting. I hope you love it. I do. You like the 13 random tips. Yeah, I liked it too. It was fun. Attending conferences, meeting others, absolutely. Hearing presentations that you never would have thought of. Affirming things you already do. Yeah, that gets to be a bigger part of it the longer you go on and the more conferences you go to. It really makes you realize how great this career is, right? Isn't it so good? You grew up with RCM and didn't even think there were other options in North America. Yeah, I mean, MTB can be done anywhere. They are based in the UK largely. I don't know whether all their examiners are in the UK or if they're kind of all over the place. They're originally from the UK, but they are an online exam, so you can do them anywhere, which is great. Makes it so much easier. And then they post the certificate to you. That's something I didn't discuss on that chat. The certificate they post out to you is really nice. It's on really nice, like, thick paper, like a card, and it's got gold lettering on it, so like it looks really beautiful, which I think is important for students. You're welcome. Glad you loved it. Okay, I think I just had one question earlier. I'm working on a composing project with my students. Do you think I should only allow them to write things they can play easily? Oh, interesting question. Okay, I don't treat it that way. I do let them write things that they can't, that are above their level. I don't let them write things that are unpianistic. So if I can't play it, I don't want them to write it. That might be outside of the scope of what you're really asking, but it does happen. Like, some students, especially younger students, less experienced students, you know, if you don't lay clear enough guardrails, they will write something that's just like boop, 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 boop. And, you know, that's okay. But it's not really... It is composing, but also it's not really what we're going for. So make sure you lay the foundation, lay the guardrails before they do it. Maybe you're using one of our projects from the library. If you are, those are kind of in place. Like, they're suggested they use this pentascale or that kind of thing. And in general, if they're a beginner to late beginner, early intermediate even, I really encourage them just to stick with the pentascale, or I just tell them they can't go outside it. But if they're more solid intermediate, of course they can explore the whole scale and they can go, you know, they can span more because they tend to put more thought into it anyway. So yeah, that's kind of how I treat that. All right, we're almost ready to wrap up another amazing year here on our YouTube show. As I said, we will have YouTube videos going out all summer long, so don't worry, there's no break in the stuff that's going out. We have a couple of fun videos coming up, and then we've got our interview series all summer to celebrate 300 episodes of the podcast, which I still can't believe. A few reminders, so we've got our new course for members in the course library if you want to check it out. It's about legato pedaling and how to teach it in a way that's really practical and works and gets students to pedal nicely, quickly. Our Teacher Turbo Boost tickets are available with early bird pricing until June 1st. That's 2 days away as I'm recording this. And it's not till the end of June 1st, right? They're expiring on June 1st. So you want to hop to it very quickly if you want to get that early bird pricing for either attending in Cincinnati in person or with our online virtual option. If you're looking at the page for the virtual tickets, it's down the bottom. You just scroll down and you'll find the link for that. And I hope you'll sign up for the 8 That Frog challenge so that we can hang out in August. That's vibrantmusicteaching.com/8TF. Again, the link is in the description. And I hope you'll come back when we return in September for our live show. If you have suggestions for things you want to see on the show, different things you want to happen, let me know. I can't confirm the timing yet because that depends on my teaching schedule, but I'll try and keep it roughly the same time it has been. Thank you all so much for being with me for another wonderful year of the live show. I started this on a whim at the start of the pandemic, so it's been a while, and I still love doing it. So thank you for joining me and hanging out with me as a community, and I'll see you in September. Bye, everyone.